All right, First Chronicles chapter 26. First Chronicles 26. I tried to do something else other than this message because I'd already assigned it to Chris to give me an outline on it. And I'd already let everybody see the verse. This was on Wednesday. You weren't here for it, but this was so exciting to me that nothing else seemed to thrill me like this passage did. So that's what we're going to get today. 1 Chronicles 26, verse 18. 1 Chronicles 26, 18. He says, "At Parbar westward, 4 at the Causeway, and 2 at Parbar." That's powerful. Enough said, we can go home. Now, I know that you're a little confused on that. I was too. Don't feel bad. It took me 32 years of reading this. At least 100 times I've read this myself, and nothing clicked on it. It's a simple, inconspicuous verse, it seems like, but there's a lot of meaning in it, and we'll look at it. Our passage says, "At Parbar westward, 4 at the Causeway, and 2 at Parbar." So this 4 and 2 of what or who? That's the question. He's given us, when you go down to the Causeway, make sure 4 are sitting there. And then when you're back at Parbar, make sure there's 2 there. 2 of what? Okay, good. Good thing we know how to read. We'll go on to verse 19. These are the divisions of the porters. Okay, so now we're talking about porters. Now these porters are qualified guards. They're not just someone, he's not talking about Walmart greeters who just open the door to everybody and, give you a big smile and say, "Come on in, spend all your money." No, these porters are actually guards. They're guarding the gate and the doors. He said in verse 8 that they had to be able men for strength for the service. So there's some sort of testing that goes on to make sure that they're qualified. What we find in this chapter are general military orders. That's what this chapter is all about. It's orders being passed down. In this chapter, the temple is spoken of as though it were there. However, it's not been built yet. You read through that passage and you think, okay, they're talking about somebody, the temple's sitting there and they're assigning people to go over here and go over there. No, nothing's been built. Samuel and then David fixed the stations and the number of porters, and then it was left to Solomon to carry out the instructions. Samuel, of course, started it way back when. He started plotting and planning. Hey, one day we're going to set up a temple for God, and this is what we're going to need. Now, he had an inside scoop. He wasn't a Levite. Well, he was a Levite, but not of Aaron. He wasn't really in the family. He was adopted in, and so the Bible calls him a prophet. That's what his position was, not really a priest, a prophet. And so with his inside knowledge, he starts plotting and planning. We need this many porters, we need this, we need that. Then he dies. What's going to happen to the plan? You might have a dream. You might have something you're working on. Okay, you work on it, you get together and put all the pieces together you can figure out, and then you'll be dead and gone. Somebody else will come along and pick up where you left off. That's what David does. I think when David picks up the plan is when he has to bring back the Ark of the Covenant from the Philistines. Remember, Uzzah touches that ark and God strikes him dead. And David suddenly says, "What's up with that? We're doing a good thing. How come he..." And you know what it did? It caused him to study. He went back in and started researching what the Levites' positions were, how that was supposed to move. And I think that created an appetite in him for things of the priesthood. And so then he started saying, hey, I'm going to build a house for God. Matter of fact, I found Samuel's been setting stuff aside for this. And so the two work together, even though they're not at the same time frame. They're not at the same table. In 1 Chronicles 9, verse 22. 1 Chronicles 9:22. He says, all these which were chosen to be porters in the gates were 212. These were reckoned by their genealogies in their villages, whom David and Samuel, the seer, did ordain in their set office. Okay, so that's who did it. Look at chapter 23. Chapter 23, verse 1. This is the real context to our verse, to our text. 1 Chronicles 23, verse 1 to 6. So when David was old and full of days, he made Solomon his son king over Israel. And he gathered together all the princes of Israel, with the priests and the Levites. Now the Levites were numbered from the age of 30 years and upward, and their number by their polls, man by man, was 38,000. That's a whole lot of calculating to do. David must have been a real accountant. Of which 24,000 were set forth for the work of the house of the Lord, and 6,000 were officers and judges. Moreover, 4,000 were porters, and 4,000 praised the Lord with instruments, which I made, said David, to praise therewith. And David divided them into courses among the sons of Levi. Now this is important. Namely, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Those all look like boring things, but those are all little pieces that you're going to need to fit together to make this whole thing work. Our passage says in chapter 26, verse 18, that these were the division of the porters. So that's the numbering, that's the instructions that have been given are for porters. So what is a porter? Well, we know it's more than a door greeter. It's more of a door guard, like in New York, or like any big city where you've got a executive tower, or a condo with rich people in it. You'll have a bellboy or a doorman, and he's not there to let everybody in. He's there to keep people out unless you have a good reason for being there. That's what these porters are. They're there, but they're not there to just swing open the door to everybody who wants to walk through. They're there to make sure you got a good reason for being there. In chapter 9, verse 18, 1 Chronicles 9:18, says, who thitherto waited in the king's gate eastward. They were porters in the company of the children of Levi. So these are Levitical gate guards. You had to be from the tribe of Levi to hold this position. In chapter 9, verse 26, he says, for these Levites, the 4 chief porters were in their set offices and were over the chambers and the treasuries of the house of God. Okay, so now we see something else that a porter does. They're a guard for the gates, for the chambers, that'd be the buildings or storage rooms, and the treasuries, the money. Okay, a porter's pretty important. We know somebody, y'all do too, named Porter. I wonder if they know what their name really means. The Bible has a lot to say about porters. In chapter 23, verse 6, 1 Chronicles 23, 6, and David divided them into courses among the sons of Levi, namely Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Okay, so there's 3 battalions, 3 divisions of soldiers, or stewards, or porters, and they're going to stand guard. They've got a job to do. In chapter 8, verse 14, I'm sorry there's so much Bible, but not really. That's the way you understand the Bible, is with more Bible. 2 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 14. I told you first, it's 2 Chronicles 8:14. This is when this temple is finally built. Our text was before it's been built. That was just when David was given instructions. But now it's been built, so Solomon's going to enact it. 2 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 14. And he appointed, according to the order of David his father, So Solomon's doing this. The courses of the priests to their service, the Levites to their charge to praise and minister before the priest, as the duty of every day required. The porters also by their courses at every gate, for so had David, the man of God, commanded. Now, this is interesting because our verse said, at Parbar westward. Okay, think about the tabernacle. In the wilderness, it was the same as the temple that was built. It always faced east. There was one door. You went in that door and you came out that door. And you had to enter it from the east. You would go in. The most holy place was at the most western point of the building. So, when these guys are the porters in Parbar, they're on the western side. They're just outside the temple, right behind the most holy place. So it's very important they are good guards. Because if somebody wanted to sneak in, they could jump that fence, cut right into the most holy place. So they needed to be a good guard. Now, God set that thing up for a reason. He moved that movement coming into the temple just like the sun moves from the east to the west. All the way through your Bible, when you find someone moving at God's command, it's from the east to the west. When they turn around and run the other way, they're soon to fall. Cain does it, the first one. He flees back toward Eden. Okay, he talked about it in Psalms 19. He says the son is as a bridegroom that runs a course. Okay, what's the course he's running? He's going from the east to the west. We got to go west, young man. He says in 2 Chronicles 35, 2 Chronicles 35, verse 14. We'll find out what these guys do, these porters. Here they're having a big Passover. They've got a celebration like none Israel's seen, and they're, just living it up. Solomon's got this thing built, and it's happy, exciting times. Let's see what happens. It wouldn't be so exciting if you were the priest having to butcher all these animals all day. 2 Chronicles 35, verse 14. And after they made ready for themselves and the priest, because the priests, the sons of Aaron, were busied in the offering of burnt offerings and the fat until night. Therefore the Levites prepared for themselves and for the priests, the sons of Aaron. And the singers and the sons of Asaph were in their place, according to the commandment of David and Asaph and Heman, and Jeduthun, the king's seers. And the porters, there they are, waited at every gate, they might not depart from their service, for their brethren the Levites prepared for them. So a porter stays on guard. He never gets to leave his post. Now we know that he had to have a time that he left his post. But here he's saying, when it's their shift, there is no lunch break. I used just enough porters that are needed at the gate, and we're not giving up any shifts. We're not giving up any smoke breaks. You're going to stay on position. Porters stay as guards, and the priests come and serve them. Well, that's good. Now we've learned something else. You can apply that spiritually. I'm not going to. In Mark chapter 13. Mark chapter 13, verse 34. Mark 13:34. He says, "For the Son of Man is as a man taking a far journey, who left his house and gave authority to his servants, to every man his work, and commanded the porter to watch." Then he says something very plain. Who's supposed to do the watching? The porter. So verse 35, Jesus tells us who the porter is. "Watch ye, therefore, for you know not when the master of the house cometh, at even, or at midnight, or at the cock crowing." So guess what? You and I are porters. Jesus says right there, the porter watches. And I'm telling you, get to watching. So, the fact of the matter is, we no longer own our body. It's been bought. It's been paid for. We're property of somebody else. You're a porter. Be sure that when the master comes back, he does not find you've let something in that shouldn't be there. We've got all these gates. Your head is full of gates. You got an eye gate, nose gate, ear gate, all those gates. David said it this way. He said, I've made an agreement with mine eyes. Why then should I look on a handmaid? Okay. So you should set a guard at all of your gates and make sure that whatever comes in there is going to be pleasing to the master of the temple. And that's where he's talking about. In Revelation 3:20, it's a verse you all know. He says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and will open the door, like a porter does, I will come into him and will sup with him, and he with me. As a porter, you should be able to recognize when the owner comes. When you read the Bible, you should recognize his voice, and it'll speak directly to you. In life's events, you should recognize his hand. Sometimes, if the person who's supposed to be in the building is not let in, it's going to cause a problem. That's Jesus Christ. A lot of people read the Bible and they don't accept it. They'll say, okay, this part I like, but that thing right there, it's stepping on my sin I like, therefore I'm going to ignore that one. No, so you're telling the owner of the temple he can't come in. He's allowed in. It's his. So that porter should have a good relationship with the owner. This temple's bought and paid for. Jesus Christ owns it. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3. This, I don't know that I can give you all the references. There's many, many references on this. But 1 Corinthians 3:16, he says, know ye not that ye are the temple of God? That's you. And that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you. If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. For the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are. Ooh, now it becomes very important that we're a good porter. Because if we lead to the delinquency of this temple, it says God takes it very serious, as though you came in and corrupted something he made. In chapter 6, verse 19, 1 Corinthians 6:19. We read that this body is the temple of God. Now we're going to get another member. 1 Corinthians 6:19. What know you not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which you have of God? Ye are not your own. This body, while it is flesh and the old man wants to rise up and do whatever it wants to, it's bought and paid for. It's not the devil's anymore. Now, we give the flesh a bad name, and most of the time the natural inclinations of the flesh are bad. But that flesh is bought and paid for. Jesus Christ owns it. It's a temple supposed to be for God. So we got to be careful with that. Look at 2 Corinthians 6, verse 16. 2 Corinthians 6:16. He says, and what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? Okay, so we should be agreeable with the things God likes and disagree with the things he disagrees with. I mean, that's just plain. For ye are the temple of the living God. As God has said, I will dwell in them and will walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore, because of all of that, come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. We're supposed to be different than the world. We're supposed to keep this temple holy. If they hadn't had no gates up, and if they had had no walls up, just anybody could have poured in there, and the temple would no longer be holy. It'd be just like city living. It'd be the mall. And it would be mauled. Okay, the orders that are given to this unit. Back to 1 Chronicles chapter 26, verse 18. The orders are given, and they're given down in verse 19 to a certain unit, a division. It's to the children of Merari. Now, the instructions we've been given are very, almost vague, but they're not. They're very simple, they're concise, and they're authoritative, just like you would expect a military order to be given. He says, at Parbar, westward, 4 at the Causeway and 2 at Parbar. Now, if you were in that group, the generals called together all the battalion heads, and he calls out Merari, and that's the orders he gives them. Merari clicks his heels and walks out of the building, and now he's got to figure out what his orders are. He's just been given very simple orders. God gives us simple orders. He doesn't overcomplicate it for us. He's going to give you today what you can handle today. That's all. If you borrow tomorrow's problem, it does you no good because you don't have tomorrow's grace. His mercies are new every morning, not every week, every morning. Now let's notice something else about our passage. We find there's 2 sets of numbers. Let's see the percentages. We've seen the porters, now let's see the percentages. He says 4 at Parbar, 4 at the Causeway, and 2 at Parbar. No mention is made of any place that's not guarded. Parbar is probably a section, or some people think it was a garrison, storage house that was on the west side of the temple. Nobody really knows. Whatever. If you really want to get scholarly about this, we can. In the Hebrew, it's used one other time, and there the word that it's rendered is subdivision or suburb, something like that. Well, of course, there's not a suburb sitting behind the temple. Well, what does suburb mean? Suburb just means an area of something, an area of town. Well, it designates a certain mileage zone. Okay, well, that's all we're talking about here, the area behind the temple, Parbar, that area. No mention is made in there of anywhere that you can just relax and it's not guarded. It's all guarded. As Christians, you never have a spot you can't guard. You should always be on guard. The closer you get to the temple, you should still be on guard. You don't come into church and let your guard down. No, sir. Keep your guard up. I might tell you something wrong. Okay? It's your responsibility to catch it. Don't just buy into it. Study it. Figure it out. Okay? Keep your guard. Now, notice the percentage. The closer you get to the causeway, that is a road, a street. It can be water or it can be pavement. The closer you get to the causeway, the more you're going to interact with people that have a different cause of this world. And there you're going to need twice as much guard. You're going to be on guard at church, that's good. But you better double it once you walk out the door. The farther from the temple you are, the more you should be on guard. Even in the court itself, at, like we would say, church, half of your attention is to be directed to the power of negative thinking. Like Jesus says, watch ye. Stay on guard. That causeway, there's another place in the Bible where he explains what that causeway was, where the people are, the guards or the porters are guarding at the causeway. That's obviously the road that's coming into the back side of that gate on the western wall there. In Ezekiel chapter 42. Ezekiel 42, verse 20. We get some more details about the temple here. We're talking about the highway that leads up to the temple grounds via the western outer wall. We're going from the profane place to the pure place. The temple was pure. And where they're coming from is profane. Ezekiel 42:20. He measured it by the four sides. It had a wall around about it, 500 reeds long and 500 broad, to make a separation between the sanctuary and the profane place. Profane. That's what he's separating. You know why it's profane? You know what was on just the other side of the western wall there? It drops off. Think about it, you'll know. What's that river? It's coming down from Megiddo here. And then it turns into what they call the Valley of the Son of Hinnom. Gehenna. Yeah, that's a profane place. You know what they did there? They sacrificed babies. That's right. Burn them. You know what America is doing now? They're trying to get into legalizing abortion at any stage of a baby's life. Same thing. Killing the children. God's not happy with that. He calls that profane. Wicked. Jeremiah 7, verse 31. Here's that profane place they come from. Jeremiah 7:31. And they have built the high places of Tophet, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire, which I commanded them not, neither came it into my heart. In Isaiah 57:5, I'll read these to you quickly, you don't have to turn there. Isaiah 57:5, inflaming yourselves with idols under every green tree, slaying the children in the valley under the clefts of the rock. Whew. No wonder we need to set a guard at the Causeway. The world has a different way of thinking than the Bible does. Talk about no natural affection. Destroying your children? That's wicked, but how could your mind go that far? But it does. It does. In Ezekiel 23:39, he says this, for when they had slain their children to their idols, then they came the same day to my sanctuary to profane it. God says, let's keep the profane place where the profane place is. Keep the sanctuary holy. The way we do that? A good porter at the gate. Lamentations 1 verse 10. Lamentations 1:10. At some point in time, the porters quit doing their job. Lamentation 1:10. The adversary hath spread out his hand upon all her pleasant things, for she hath seen that the heathen entered into her sanctuary, whom thou didst command that they should not enter into thy congregation. Somebody wasn't guarding the gate. They got in. They got right into the sanctuary, and now they've profaned it. Modern Christianity, you could say, has been profaned. The world has crept in. Somebody's not guarding the gate. Beyond that, Christians themselves, too much of the world has walked right on in. We need to be a good porter, guarding our gates. In 2 Timothy 3, verse 5, he says this, talking about some of these people in the last times, the end times. 2 Timothy 3, verse 5. He says, this is how you'll know them. Having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. If you're the porter, you're the guard gate, just because somebody walks there up there and it looks like they're real religious, if they don't have the power of God behind them, turn them away. No, you're not allowed in here. It's not enough to be able to speak Christianese, know all the language. There should be some power of God behind it. In verse 6, for of this sort are they which creep into houses and lead captive silly women laden with sins, led away of divers lusts. Okay, these are a bunch of creeps. They're creeping in. You know what Jesus said when he was here? I think it's in John chapter 10. He says that if you're going to get in, you have to come in through the door. And if you don't, then you're a thief and a robber. And they try to climb up some other way. Okay, they're not coming in through the gate. They're not coming in through the eastern entrance. They're not coming in through the front door. There's only one door, not front door. Only one door at the temple. They would try to climb up some other way and cut through. They're a thief and a robber. Just like this right here. They have a form of godliness. They might show up, with all the right clothes on, but there's no power of God behind it. God's power starts on the inside, not the outside. Okay, so we've seen the porters, the percentages. Now let's see the prestige. I'm going to show you something exciting. 1 Chronicles 26:19. 1 Chronicles 26:19. These are the divisions of the porters among the sons of Korah. You know who that is? Kori, but it's also Korah. It's spelled 3 different ways. Korah is the brother to Merari, and Izhar, the father of Korah. Among the sons of Merari. Okay, so you've got 2 brothers that are a team here. It's their descendants that are these porters. You know who Korah was? Korah was a bad guy in the Bible. That's right. 250 people died because of him. He was an instigator of instability amongst Israel. Started complaining about the way God was doing things. He thought he knew better. You know what he was complaining about? His whole thing was, I don't want to be a porter. I don't want to do this service over here you've assigned me to. I want to stand behind the pulpit and be the big man everybody sees. I want to take Moses' position. How is it that you get to do all the prophesying and I don't? That's what he was saying. Well, that was a bad thing to say because Moses didn't feel that way. A little while later, you find a place where all of these people start prophesying, and some of them are prophesying in the camp, not in the temple grounds. And Joshua comes running in there to Moses and says, you need to stop it. They're out there prophesying. And Moses said, I wish they all would. That was his reply. So Moses wasn't power hungry. This was, when Korah came in there, he was trying to stir something up where there wasn't something. That was, there was more to it. It was envy. But here this name gets redeemed. Now, some of his descendants are part of the guards that are going to protect Israel instead of destroy it. God's long-suffering with us, isn't he? And he'll allow you to redeem your past sins and iniquities. All you got to do is decide you're going to do right now. You can't go backwards and fix the past, but God can forgive the past. You know, Moses was a murderer, and he turned into the biggest example of the Messiah there is. All through the Old Testament, they're looking for a prophet like unto Moses. You know, when he shows up, Jesus Christ is the prophet like unto Moses. Well, Moses started out a murderer. God can fix your past. David was an adulterer. You know who David turns into? This hasn't happened yet. He's going to be king on earth for eternity. You find that in Jeremiah 30, verse 9. Paul, remember Paul? We talked about him in Sunday school. Paul was a persecutor of the church, killing people. And he turns into the apostle to the Gentiles. He says God's going to judge every man according to my gospel. God sure forgives and forgets a lot of things, if we're willing. But Korah didn't get forgiveness. If you'll stand guard as a proper porter at your post, your past history can be redeemed. That's what God wants to do. He's a redeemer. Korah is now a name connected with the protection of the temple instead of the destruction of Israel. We've got to be a good porter. The heathens seem to always have a good cause when they're coming through that causeway, to enter in where they don't belong. Remember what happened when they were trying to rebuild in Nehemiah? Guys show up and say, oh, let us build with you. We'll help you. We serve your God just like you do. We did it before you did it. It seemed like they got some good reasons. But they said, no, sir. God won't let us. God won't let us. The porter should know the mind of God. That's the power of God. Not the deeds, the power. We should know the mind of God well enough to refuse the reason of the world when they show up on the causeway, trying to enter and make the perfect place a profane place, because that's what they want to do. In Jude chapter 1, verse 11, Jude 1:11, we find out how Korah shows up in our day. Woe to them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, and ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, and have perished in the gainsaying of Korah. You know what Korah shows up doing? Gainsaying. Saying you can do this and it'll do good for you. You want to be a millionaire, do this, spend your money, give me some seed money. Let me send you a prayer rug. Okay, that's gainsaying. Saying something to get gain. But there's no gain in this. It's all God. That's what you have to gain, is everything. Jesus Christ says, I'm come that they might have life. You don't even have life yet if you're not saved. Okay. Our passage again, and we'll be done, in 1 Chronicles 26:18. He says, at Parbar westward, 4 at the Causeway, and 2 at Parbar. These are the division of the porters among the sons of Korah, and among the sons of Merari. We're sons of God, and we should be porters. So as you go out into the world tomorrow and today, make sure you're doing exactly what Jesus said. Watch ye, be a good porter.